And we'll get back to the Walmart story shortly, but next tonight, Afghanistan, where both the U.S. and Afghan governments are exploring new negotiations with the Taliban. Margaret Warner sat down with 3 Afghan women who have a significant amount at stake in the outcome.
We don't see the real inclusion. We don't see the real participation of us.
These women are influential figures in Afghanistan, in politics, business, and non-governmental organizations. That's a far cry from the subordinate role women held in Taliban-era Afghanistan, barred from schools and most jobs, and brutalized for social infractions.
Nice to meet you. Hello.
They were in Washington last week meeting with senior members of the administration and Congress. Their message: women's voices must be heard as the U.S. and Afghan governments chart the course ahead. Their visit came at a crucial time. The summer fighting season against the Taliban has reached a fever pitch. Yet the administration and President Hamid Karzai's government are also stepping up efforts to talk to the Taliban, including figures reportedly close to Mullah Omar seeking a negotiated end to the 10-year-old war. What's more, President Obama is on the verge of announcing how many U.S. troops he'll begin withdrawing from Afghanistan next month. At a White House meeting, Lieutenant General Doug Lute, the president's point man on Afghanistan, told the women the troop decision will be made in a thoughtful manner.
I want to first reassure you that this will be a responsible, deliberate adjustment of U.S. force posture and not a rush to the exit, as some people have suggested.
I spoke with 3 of these women right after that session. Afghan-American entrepreneur Rangina Hamidi set up a business for local women producing embroidered goods in Kandahar. I began by asking her how she feels about talking to the Taliban, who still terrorize her city.
I live in a region where death is part of life in a way that is not understood in a lot of parts of the world. Death is so close to us, where every second and every minute of our life we consider and accept that we might not be here the next minute. And so if talking to the Taliban would mean bringing peace and stability to the level where I don't have to think about death every second of my life, then I'm for it.
Kuramana Kakar, a gender advisor to President Karzai's negotiating team, supports the talks, but she also worries about where they might lead.
As a woman, I do have concerns as other women in the country, and that a peace deal with the Taliban might affect human rights or the rights of women, which they have right now in the country. However, I would say that the government has to ensure that the rights of all citizens are protected, and that when negotiations take place, all the conditions on the rights of women or human rights in general should be taken into account.
30-year-old Wajma Fro advocates for women's causes in Afghanistan. She supports the talks too, despite vivid memories of the fear she felt as a refugee in Pakistan, returning for visits home in the Taliban days.
So from a matter of principle, I am for it, even with the Taliban in other elements. But I also believe that Taliban are not the only threats to the women of Afghanistan or to the people of Afghanistan. I have seen warlords who have raped women on the streets. We have seen people who have taken our lands. We have seen people who have done more damage.
Do any of you know anyone personally who identifies himself as Taliban?
Yes.
And do you think he or they have changed their attitudes about the role of women in society?
These couple of the commanders that I came to know and I know, like, they are very, very traditional people. Their mentality, they grew up in a home where they didn't see their own mother, for example, literally.
They were trained and brought up in camps across the nation where they didn't see the love of a mother, the love of a father, of a family, so that they can be included in a society as a normal human being. So when you take these elements or this background into consideration, you can be hopeful that they're human beings, that they will change, because to be a human being, we're constantly changing.
Then you have commanders who are very ideologically driven. and they are very politically driven. Their ideas is that, for example, there should be no school in this village, no clinic, no sort of progress, no government presence. With them, it's much more difficult. These are the people who behead, for example, school teachers. These are the people who burn down schools. And it's very difficult to reconcile with that sort of elements.
So, do you want to add something?
I could also not imagine if I would ever be able to talk with the Talib commander or with people who have been at the leadership level of the Taliban. But I would not name anyone, but right now I sit with them. They were former Talibans, but they have joined the government. They discuss with me political situations, the situation of women. They give some very good recommendations in order to improve the situation of women in the country.
I think what is missing from the current conversation on Afghanistan, that the Afghan government is a part of the problem. The reasons that it has driven people towards insurgency under the brand of Taliban is the Afghan government. It has no capacity in providing people with those access to justice. So a 13-year-old girl raped by 13 men, which police officers among them. What do you expect people? Like the father of that girl said, I will blow myself up in a suicide attack, blowing up a government entity.
But I mean, do you think that's really what's driving the insurgency?
Young men, they have absolutely no opportunity. I went to Uruzgan in 2005 and saw streets full of young men just sitting in the sun, just bathing in the sun, because there was nothing to do. No schools, no jobs, no factories, no skill-producing activities for them to be involved with.
If Taliban return to the government, do you think they will start pushing a more conservative social agenda about the role and rights of women?
It depends. If they come in and join the government with accepting the Constitution and especially articles related to human rights in general and women's rights, I think they will be obliged then, according to the Constitution, to allow women to participate in all sectors, whether it's social or political. However, the risk is there, of course.
Is the Karzai government listening to these concerns? Is it committed to these concerns as it embarks on these talks?
I don't think so. He does listen to us at times, just the way the international community listens to us, but never does what we ask them for. Similarly, the president too listens to us. We have relationships, we have conversations, but in action, because it's not the priority for them, it's the threat has to be mitigated, and we are not the threat. The women of this country are not the threat, so literally what they are doing is to mitigate the threat, and we will talk about women's issues later.
So the reason we're supporting peace first, and most importantly, is that when there is peace, at least the threat to our life will hopefully be, kind of taken care of, and then we can work on all those issues, which will take many, many years. I'm 33 years old. I don't foresee a very dramatic, positive change in the lives of women in my lifetime if I live another 33 years. So that's a reality picture that I've painted for myself. But if my work can be the roots of change for my daughter and my grandchildren's life, that's the change and the hope that I'm living with today. What our fear is that we don't want the repetition of what the past decades have showed us. And so our being in Washington and talking to you is one way to get the message across to please do not let Afghanistan fall back to the years of civil war, to the years of injustice and inhuman acts against all sectors of society, most especially women. So for once, let's listen to the women and take their suggestions seriously.
Right now, the president is considering how many troops to withdraw from Afghanistan and how quickly. What is your thought on that? Would you like to see U.S. troops begin to leave and in substantial numbers?
It all depends on the reconciliation process. I would say we should wait a little bit more to see how this process goes further. But we cannot have a deadline for the reconciliation process because it takes a long time. It's a social process.
But on the Afghan side, I think it's also important to start seeing the reduction of troops for the purpose of proving to Afghanistan that America is not here to occupy, because that is the propaganda that insurgents are using to control the hearts and minds of Afghan citizens, that America is here to occupy you. And so, but I do want to stress that we cannot, and I'm sure that the American government is not naive in pulling out the entire troop, overnight, but that a gradual troop reduction on the ground will mean to the Afghan people and to the Afghanistan government that America is not going to be in Afghanistan forever. Therefore, we're going to be forced to sit and make a deal with each other, be it tribal, be it community or regional-wise, to make peace, literally, because you are not going to have this international protection for much longer.
What would you say to Americans who are growing very war-weary if they were to listen to this conversation and conclude it's just hopeless, we ought to just leave? What would you say to them?
I would say that if the situation of Afghanistan is hopeless today, America has contributed to that as well as part of the international community. So there has to be the issue of accountability. Why did you go in 2001? If the country, have you achieved the objective? That is the major question that we as Afghans are asking the American government.
I would like to remind America that when we pulled out of Afghanistan in 1989, we ended up going back in 2001. I hope that we do not repeat that mistake.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you for having us.
President Obama will announce his plan on Wednesday for beginning to draw down U.S. troops from Afghanistan, according to a White House official.